Today we're going to take a look at what makes a great tank destroyer and a great tank overall, and really what holds back a lot of different vehicles. My name is Ladpad and welcome to the video. I've got a two-part replay video for you today, and we're starting the game off in the E-25, an excellent tank destroyer. What makes this tank good is, first off, it's one of the more rare or unique tanks in the game in that it has preferential matchmaking. This tank can see tier 5, 6, and 7, and 8, but it will never see tier 9. Normally in +2 matchmaking, you can see enemies that are 2 tiers higher than you, but in the E-25 that just does not happen. And so it allows you to have much easier competition, and today I'm just going to be wailing on some poor tier 7s. You will also see that I'm firing a ton of APCR. In this tank, one of the big weaknesses is that this tank has very mediocre penetration. I make up with this by shooting a lot of APCR, and while it's not completely necessary, this is how I have fun and this is how I enjoy it. And you'll see that as soon as I start shooting at this IS-2, I just cannot do anything. I'm not going to be able to penetrate almost any shells purely because the penetration on this tank is just not good enough. This is essentially the gun from the Stug 5, the tier 5 tank, and it really is not good. Well played from this IS-2. He knows that I'm shooting from this bush, and so he blind fires me. But note, he cannot see me. One of the really crucial or key things about the E-25 is that it has incredible camo. And so you can actually, one of the more unique things you can do in the game is you can shoot in the E-25 over and over and over, and you will not get spotted. The reason for this is that tank destroyers used to have a buff. It used to be they could fire and they would have a reduced penalty to their camouflage compared to other tanks. Wargaming actually took this away in general, removed that class feature from the game, but because the E-25 is a premium, they felt they couldn't nerf it, and so they left it in. And so that means the E-25 has much improved camo while firing, and it allows you to shoot at these medium distances in low tier games where people don't have enough view range, and you can just farm people endlessly. Already just 2.5 minutes into this game, I'm up to 2,300 damage. That's the equivalent of about 3 or 4 tier 5 tanks, and I've ripped this game apart. I want to point out that what this tank has allowed me to do, I had the mobility to get into position, I had the camo and the view range to progress the fight. Yes, I'm not charging straight into my opponents, but the fact that I've got this mobility and then a pretty decent gun means that I can do a lot with it. The E-25's gun is not amazing, the damage per minute is very good, but the penetration is just really poor. But you can make it work because you've got mobility, you've got camo, you've got a lot of different things that allow this tank to be useful. And as compared to our next tank in the upcoming replay, you'll see that other tanks just cannot. They can't progress the fight like the E-25 can. This mobility allows me to do so many different things. I was able to shoot unspotted and just farm free damage, and it really is the difference between great tanks and mediocre tanks. If you can find situations, common situations, in a tank where you can be successful, then you will do great things. In the E-25, you can find sort of any flank where you can get at long range, where you can use your camo. All of those flanks are going to be incredible opportunities for you. You're not completely reliant on your allies charging in because you can spot for yourself, you can make out plays with your camo, and it allows you just to do a lot of different things that aren't always possible in other tanks. Right here, I've got enough health, I can tank from the J Panther, and then my damage per minute is exceptional, and it's not just exceptional for a regular tank. This is exceptional for a tier 7 tank destroyer. I'm packing, I think, about 3,000 plus damage per minute, and it meant just shooting on reload I could do immense amounts of damage despite my limited alpha damage and penetration. So this tank, very good, able to do a ton of things well. And now in these late game situations, you can hunt down light tanks, you can hunt down Type 64s, and you really don't have to fear anything at all. And so the E-25 is fantastic. It's got the mobility, it's got the camo, and it's got a nice damage per minute that makes it very usable. It doesn't store up all of its stats into one feature. Some tanks are a little limited in that they've got only good gun, or only great mobility, or only good armor. The E-25 has very good mobility. It has a very good gun, and it's got enough armor to get the occasional ricochet. That means this is a well-rounded tank destroyer that can do a ton on its own. And so it allowed me to just dominate this game, to push forward and get an immense amount of things done. And it really makes for an awesome gameplay experience. And unfortunately, I'm going to come just short of TD2, but I nearly finished an Object 260 mission in a tier 7 tank, coming 180 damage short, and that is just how capable the E-25 is. Our next replay is going to be in the ISU 122-2. This is one of the most newly released tanks in the game, and to sum it up very quickly, the ISU kind of sucks. What it has is it has a double 122mm gun, and the one thing it is great at is you can fire both guns in 2 seconds and do 780 alpha damage. That is the highest alpha damage on any tier 8 tank destroyer, albeit it is not as good as the BZ-176, which is a heavy tank and just completely overpowered. In this replay, notice I cannot get into the bushes to spot for myself because I am playing a tank that really can't operate on its own. If you fire at range and you keep your distance and you play the support role, then the ISU 122 is very, very good. I was able to wallop in a ton of damage into my opponents just by playing well and sniping. And if you get into these long range situations where nobody's able to spot you, then you can do a lot of different things well. However, this is really the dream situation, as I fired in 2 more and penetrate both into the SU-152. Notice, I'm staying so far back that over here on the view range circles, I cannot be spotted. This is at 500 meters distance, and I'm lucky to be hitting some of these shells. And while the double shot feature is allowing me to do a lot of different things, this would normally not be possible. I'm not being pressured, nobody's shooting at me, because what this tank sucks at is getting shot at. It's both relatively immobile. It's not slow, but you'll notice I'm only going at about 40 kilometers per hour, and this is in a chassis that has no armor whatsoever. This is just a box of hit points. I believe it's a backwards facing ISU, so it's really like running around with your rear end facing the opponents at all times. And add on to this that you've got a rear facing turret, so if you want to come around a corner, then they're going to be able to shoot your front before you pop through. What makes this even worse is the fact that the ISU 122 has its engine, I believe, in the front, meaning that if people are shooting at you into the hole, a lot of times they're going to damage your engine and you're going to die from that. So this tank is something that can shoot in the back, it can snipe at range, it can support, but it can't progress the situation at all. Also notice, even with a good crew, I cannot get close to a max view range distance, the max spotting distance, because this tank is completely dependent on its opponents. And the reason I bring up the E-25 and the ISU in the same video is I want you to see how completely dependent this tank is. I can't push forward into spot because I don't have the view range. I can't use my mobility to spot things because this is it's a medium speed tank. I have to wait until somebody else spots something and then I can do things. Right there, once something is spotted, I get to double clap for 812, and that feels amazing. But this is just a tank that is completely reliant on others. The E-25 to my left over here, he could spot, he could use his mobility and get in position, he could flank, and me, in the higher tier tank, has to just sit back and wait. And that's not a terrible thing. There are many tanks that have to sit back and wait and be that support role. But I can't be the one progressing like this E-25 is. I can't be getting the damage. And so I think this is where you have tanks that have exciting attributes and they just aren't good tanks. They're enjoyable. They can be fun. But they have to be in their perfect scenario. I was in the dream situation in this tank. I was waiting around until everything went right. And when random enemies pop up right in front of me, I can double, but then I'm never going to bounce an STRV S1. But I outtrade him, I do a ton of damage, and you'll notice this is the dream situation. I have a long interclip reload, but a fairly fast reload in general, and so I get to put in a double shell, then fire on reload, giving me 3 shots in about 9 seconds. And that is the best situation for this tank. Putting in your double and then firing the first shot is just the maximum damage you can have, and 1200 damage in 8 seconds is really, really good. I got a very clean kill on that STRV S1. It was fantastic, but lucky. You can't count on S1s being randomly spotted out in the open every single game. You can't progress the situation every single time that you want. And so this is why this tank is, albeit very fun, and it's a blast. I love doubling things more than perhaps anything else in this game. This is fun, but it is not reliable. The gun feels great, and being able to move around with some mobility, it's fine, but you're just not consistent enough to push through the pace of the battle to do things every single game. These are the types of tanks you play at the end of a day when you don't want to think very much and you just want to sit in a corner and snipe. And I got to do that very, very well. I'm up to 4,900 damage, I'm up to 1,000 assistance, and I've had a really good game. But for every one of these games that you have, you're going to have another game where you can't progress the fight at all, and you're just bored out of your mind. And so this is not something to play for those of you who are looking for super engaging, high-level gameplay. This is just a sit-back and relax replay where you get to have a little bit of fun and rest from the absolute grinds. E-25, it has mobility, it has camo, and it's got a ton of damage per minute. You can do things. And the ISU, on the other hand, they're just not capable of doing enough. You'll see I instantly take an engine damage shot from the E-75, and now I'm trying to progress the situation. I want to get a little bit more damage. He pushes up on me, and you'll notice he is easily able to put in a shell. And now I'm stuck. I'm facing 3 tanks. I can't side scrape because I don't have any armor. I really want to get in a couple more shells in order to get to that 6,000 damage mark. And I hear the E-75 fire, I see the E-25 is going in, and I'm thinking I've got 8 seconds left on the game, maybe I can accomplish something, but the SMV is still focused on me, and right before I get the double off, he manages to shut me down. Well played to him, and an unfortunate death for me, because instead of getting to 6,000 damage, I have to be content with 5.3k, and a good game. But it could have been so much more if I had armor, or if I had mobility, if I'd been able to flank more effectively in that situation in any other tank. And that's, I think, the key distinction. The E-25 can push the fight. The IC really cannot. And just to completely emphasize how bad this thing can be when things don't all line up your way, welcome to perhaps the worst game of World of Tanks I've ever seen. I'm sitting here waiting for some sniping to happen, waiting for an enemy to make a mistake. Nobody ends up doing it, so I decide I'll move into a sniping position, and I'll see if anybody spots the tanks in front of me. Notice I really cannot spot anything because I've got no view range, and so I'm just waiting, completely dependent on allies for something. I can't go into the dip right here because I don't have any gun depression. I suppose I could have gone up high, but I wanted to wait for an opportunity lower down, and I can't push south because I've got absolutely no armor. So I'm sitting around waiting for an opportunity. I think I maybe get a shot at the FCM. Unfortunately, it does not happen, and now this entire flank is clear, and I'm completely full health. So I think to myself, hey, I should be fine to push. I can make some aggressive plays. And then I insta-die. There's an AMX hiding in the bushes. There's an SU hiding in these bushes. There's a Kari around the corner. And I had no armor to bounce any shells. I didn't have any view range to see what was ahead of me. I was coming in on full head of steam, full health, with no spotted enemies anywhere here. I never had an opportunity to shoot something. I don't believe my cursor ever went over an enemy tank because there's really nothing to be done. It's 4 minutes left on the game. We're collapsing on the flanks. This is going to be a win, but it's just not an enjoyable experience when things don't go your way. When it all goes right, you'll feel amazing, but that's true of any tank. And when you actually have to do things on your own, your tank will end up like this, and you'll be a pretty miserable, sad camper. Taking a quick look at the post-game results, the E-25 Tier 7 tank does 4,820 damage, picks up a top gun, and just absolutely blew through the enemy team. I was firing on reload for almost the entirety of this game. Out of 60 shells, I fired 51, so I'm getting close to the damage cap for this tank, albeit I was firing at long range and missed several shots that either deviated or that I had some poor aim with. Notably, this tank is not great for the free-to-play player because it's so reliant on things like food and firing APCR, and so despite making 200,000 credits, I only come out with 60,000 credits profit because of the immense resupply cost for all those APCR rounds. Still, this is one of my feel-good tanks, a tank I've 3-marked, and so for me, it's absolutely worth paying a pretty price when you get epic results like this. Let's contrast this to a completely different tank. The ASU 122-2 ends up with 5,300 damage, although I should mention that this is in a tier 8 game, and the moment that I started pushing and getting aggressive, I immediately got killed. And so, while this tank did a lot in this situation, fired 16 shells, hit 15, penetrated 15, and while this was an excellent result, this was based off of enemies that just happened to be out in the open for me this time. I got very lucky. All the stars aligned for the ISU 122-2, and this is just not something you can do reliably. I honestly think that the E-25 would be a better choice, I think, than this tank would be, because the E-25 has the camo, it has the flexibility. I think the E-25 would be a better tier 8 tank than this one. Sure, the E-25 would suffer. It's got a worse gun if we're directly comparing the two. It's got a worse gun than the ASU 122-2, but the damage per minute that's capable in that tank in the E-25 is just more usable. Of course, an E-25 can't fight something at tier 10, but if we're talking tier 8 only matchups, the E-25 has mobility, it has camo, it can spot things, it can fire without getting spotted, and you can progress the pace of the battle. And for the players who are really good right now, or for those who are aspiring to be really good, you want tanks that can affect and change the battlefield. You don't want to have to hold down a flank just with their firing angle. You want to be able to progress and get people out of their firing spots and their camping situations. And that's something the E-25 can do, and frankly the ISU 122 can't. You can make hefty profits, you can have a lot of fun, but this tank is just not going to be very competitive for those that are trying their absolute hardest. With that said, thanks for watching. I apologize for being gone so long. I've had a lot of crazy work things to deal with, and hopefully I will be back on a more regular schedule starting this week. With that said, I'm Lad, and I'm out.